Welcome to NTD News. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Here are today's top stories. Nancy Pelosi says the House will vote this week on the impeachment inquiry. Republicans have criticized the investigation. Pelosi says the vote will put concerns about the inquiry to rest. 200,000 Californians under evacuation orders. Flames chase residents from wealthy Los Angeles neighborhoods. Authorities urge residents to heed orders. Details emerge about the raid on the ISIS compound that led to the death of the terrorist group's leader. Australia regulators have filed a lawsuit against Google, alleging the tech giant misled consumers into thinking they weren't being tracked when they were. It says Google was collecting location data even after users turned their location history off. The House is going to vote on impeachment this week. That's according to top House Democrats who are trying to fend off calls from Republicans to make the process more transparent. NTD's Holly Kellum has the details.
The chairman of the House Rules Committee said Monday the vote is to ensure transparency in the investigation. In taking the vote, House Democrats are caving to a number of Republican and White House demands. It's not required by law or House rules for the House to take a vote to open impeachment, but the White House has refused to comply with the inquiry until a formal vote is held. House Republicans have complained that the investigation is largely happening behind closed doors. They accuse House Democrats of selectively leaking information to the press and restricting Republican access to impeachment-related documents. The impeachment resolution hasn't yet been released, but House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said it would do four things. It would establish procedures for open hearings, authorize the disclosure of testimony transcripts, outline procedures to transfer evidence to the House Judiciary Committee, and lay down rights of due process for the president and his counsel. Media reports say the vote is set to be held Thursday. House Democrats also said Monday they plan to hold a White House official in contempt. Charles Kupperman, a deputy to former National Security Advisor John Bolton, failed to comply with a subpoena. He was called to testify before Congress Monday, but didn't show up. Kupperman said he would only comply if ordered by a judge. Holly Kellum, NTD News.
More than 200,000 Californians are under evacuation orders today as wildfires continue to burn across the state. Wind-whipped flames in Los Angeles have driven thousands of residents from their neighborhoods.
The latest outbreak broke out around 1:30 a.m. local time near the Getty Center. It charred more than 600 acres in the scrub-covered hills around Interstate 405, near some of the city's most expensive homes. The flames are being fueled by a historic wind event and very low humidity. More than 25 million people are under red flag warnings.
Go means go. Save not only your own life, but don't put our first responders in harm's way.
90-year-old Nola Highland and her neighbor of 40 years, 79-year-old Betsy Landis, left their homes in Los Angeles before the fire approached.
I had 3 phone calls starting at 3 a.m. The first 2 were from the fire department saying, get ready to be evacuated, or get ready to evacuate. And the last call was, evacuate now, from the police department.
Landis watched as emergency workers knocked on her friend's front door and went into her house to get her.
Well, I knew that I had to get out, that there was no fooling around about it.
Officials are hoping some residents can begin to return home, but caution that they are not out of the woods yet.
We're going to go into another critical period Tuesday night into Wednesday.
In addition to Los Angeles, the Kincaid fire in Northern California has burned tens of thousands of acres. Out of extreme caution, power companies announced they may again shut off electricity to prevent more fires. Almost 600,000 in the north and another 200,000 down south could lose power.
There are new details on the raid that ended in the death of ISIS's leader. Just this morning, President Trump confirmed on Twitter that ISIS's #1 replacement was also terminated by American troops. That's just one of the details we learned today about a mission that had been in the making for some time and was fraught with risk.
5 p.m. Saturday evening. 8 American helicopters were carrying as many as 100 U.S. Special Operations Forces. They took off from Iraq and flew for 70 minutes across Syria. The pilots flew low to avoid detection, but came under fire during the flight, returning fire as they went. Their destination was a compound in western Syria. According to President Trump, the area had been under surveillance for a few weeks. We learned today an informant inside ISIS told the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces that the elusive ISIS leader was hiding out at this compound and provided a piece of underwear and a blood sample that was used in a DNA test to confirm his identity before the raid took place.
The aim was to capture Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and if we couldn't capture him, then of course we were going to kill him.
When they arrived, the helicopters began firing on the buildings, allowing the soldiers from the Army's elite Delta Force and their canines to land. Believing the front door was booby-trapped, they blew holes in the side walls in order to enter the compound. An intense firefight ensued, and a number of ISIS fighters were killed, with at least 2 fighters captured and 11 children taken into custody. 2 of Baghdadi's wives were also killed during the operation. They were found with their suicide vests still intact. Baghdadi himself fled into an underground tunnel, taking 3 children with him. A canine member of the Delta Force team went after Baghdadi, and that's when the terrorist leader detonated his suicide vest, killing himself and the 3 children with him. It's unknown if they were his children.
We tried to call him out and ask him to surrender himself. He refused. He went down into a subterranean area, and in the process of trying to get him out, he detonated a suicide vest, we believe, and killed himself.
President Trump says 2 American Special Forces members were slightly wounded in the attack. The Delta Force canine was also wounded, but is reportedly doing fine. A short time ago, President Trump tweeted out this picture of the dog. His name is still classified. A DNA test positively identified Baghdadi's body soon after he was killed. U.S. Special Forces were in the compound for about 2 hours and were able to gather what's described as highly sensitive material on ISIS before pulling out and flying back to Iraq.
Baghdadi and the thugs who follow him were responsible for some of the most brutal atrocities of our time. His death marks a devastating blow for the remnants of ISIS, who are now deprived of their inspirational leader, following the destruction of their physical caliphate earlier this year.
Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who dreamed of destroying the West and was responsible for the murder of thousands of people around the world, was buried at sea by American forces.
The U.S. telecommunications regulator plans to vote next month to declare China's Huawei and ZTE companies as national security risks. It would bar U.S. rural service providers that depend on these companies from tapping an $8.5 billion government fund to purchase equipment or services. Officials said yesterday that the Federal Communications Commission also plans to require rural telecom providers to remove and replace existing equipment from such designated companies. The commission plans to vote on November 19th. It plans to ask carriers how much it would cost to undertake these changes on existing networks. The commission then plans to establish a reimbursement program to offset the costs of removing the equipment. This is the latest in a series of actions by the U.S. government aimed at barring U.S. companies from purchasing Huawei and ZTE equipment in the interests of national security. And an Australian regulator has filed a lawsuit against Google for collecting and using personal location data without the consent of smartphone users.
The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, ACCC, said on Tuesday that Google allowed its customers to think that they had turned off location tracking services on their phones and tablets when they hadn't. It said this went on for nearly 2 years.
So you could have been walking around the city thinking that you had location history turned off, that your location history would not have been collected, when in fact it was being collected and it was being kept.
This forms part of a global crackdown on big tech firms such as Facebook and Alphabet Inc., which owns Google. Investigative reports have cited Google for tracking the location of its users without the user's awareness. In August 2018, an Associated Press investigation showed that many Google services on Android devices and iPhones recorded users' movements. This even after the user turned off their location history. One of the Google services in question is Google Maps. It stored users' location in Google Timeline, a feature introduced in 2015. At the time this information was being released, this privacy issue was affecting about 2 billion users on Android operating systems alone. A year earlier, it was exposed that Google had been able to determine a cell phone user's location within a quarter-mile radius, or even pinpoint the exact location in urban areas by collecting data using nearby cellular towers. This happened even when location services were disabled. This function was later terminated by Google.
We're also alleging that some of the behaviour is continuing. We want Google to have to let people know what's gone on so that people have a greater awareness of what data is actually being collected here and what it's being used for.
There's a case management hearing set for November 14, according to the Australian Federal Court website.
It's hard to make an accurate prediction about Brexit, but one expert says in the next few months, the UK is highly likely to adopt the agreement negotiated between Britain and the EU. And this may lead to trilateral relations on trade between the UK, the EU, and the US.
I think one lesson is it's very hard to disentangle from your commitments in the world. You know, the UK is trying to leave the European Union that it's been a part of for 40 years. That turns out that's really, really hard.
The Brexit deadline has been extended until January 31st. Based on the current situation, Wright says it is almost impossible for the UK to leave the EU without an agreement.
It's highly likely at this point that the UK will leave with the deal that Boris Johnson negotiated. I think that's not just the base case. I think it's probably somewhere close to 70-75% chance.
Brexit is regarded by some as a major loss to both the EU and UK in terms of economy and security. Wright says the UK and EU will likely have lengthy negotiations on trade arrangements for up to 10 years, and the EU as a whole will be in a much better position to negotiate.
The UK is going to be in very difficult negotiations, probably on the losing side for most of that 10-year period.
President Trump has promised that once the UK leaves the EU, the United States will sign a big trade deal with the UK.
Any UK-US talks should be, if not formally, they should be at least in part informally trilateral. But ultimately, our interests are that you should be as prosperous as possible in trading with both.
Wright says that in talking with the EU and US at the same time, the UK can consider what regulations and standards it will adopt in the future, and that will lead to an outcome in the best interests of the country. Reporting by Kitty Wong, NTD News.
Details from the first phase report on London's Grenfell tower blaze points to serious mistakes in the handling of the disaster. The second phase will look at the wider circumstances of the fire, including the design of the building.
The London Fire Brigade has been blamed for serious shortcomings and institutional failures in a report on the Grenfell tower fire. These failings meant less lives were saved from the accidental fire that engulfed the 23-story apartment block in West London on June 14, 2017. The fire that began at just before 1 a.m. claimed the lives of over 70 people in the deadliest fire in a residential building in the UK since World War II. Under heavy criticism is the firefighters' stay-put strategy. This was used on the assumption that a fire would remain contained within an apartment until the time taken to get the flames under control. In his report, retired Judge Martin Moore-Bick said that if the stay-put strategy had been abandoned earlier, there would have been fewer fatalities. He went on to say that the use of flammable cladding in a refurbishment of the building had acted as a kind of fuel, meaning the fire spread rapidly to the floors above. Despite the difficult circumstances the firefighters encountered, the report praised their extraordinary courage and selfless devotion to duty. The Phase 1 report was due to be released to the public on Wednesday, but had been leaked to the press ahead of time. Phase 2 of the inquiry will begin in early 2020 and is not expected to report back till 2021.
Hong Kong today disqualified pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong from taking part in upcoming district elections. It's a move likely to spark more discord in a city hit by 5 months of unrest.
Hong Kong has disqualified activist Joshua Wong from running in local elections next month. On Tuesday, Wong confirmed the ban on the grounds that advocacy for Hong Kong's self-determination violates election law. He called the move political censorship.
Now, I become the only candidate banned from running in November's district council election. The decision to ban me from running office is clearly politically driven. The so-called reasons is judging subjectively on my intention to uphold basic law. But everyone would know that the true reason is my identity. Joshua Wong is the crime in their mind.
Wong has not been a prominent figure in the last 5 months of sometimes violent protests, which are largely leaderless. However, he has a high profile abroad. Wong went on a tour to the US and Germany this year, lobbying for overseas support for the protests. Beijing has said that it strongly disapproved of his meetings with foreign politicians. Chinese state media has called him a pro-independence leader, a claim he denies. Barring Wong from elections is likely to fuel further discord in Hong Kong. He urged protesters to take to the streets this weekend, which is expected to be filled with violent clashes.
Amidst the ongoing anti-government rallies, Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam said today that the city is likely to see a record negative growth in 2019.
Hong Kong is likely to enter recession. That's according to the city's leader Carrie Lam on Tuesday. The city is grappling with 5 months of sometimes violent protests that show no signs of fading. Lam said the demonstrations have taken a heavy toll on the economy.
Our current assessment is that the full year of 2019 will likely show negative growth, which means we won't be able to achieve the already revised down positive growth of 0 to 1%. The situation is very grim.
Lam added the central government in Beijing was confident her administration could return the city to normal. But she warned actions of protesters were hindering the chance for reform. Last week, her government announced relief measures of $250 million as the social unrest continues to impact the city's retail and tourism.
Up next, the death toll rises in Iraq as masked security forces fire on anti-government protesters. The United Nations urges restraint. That and more when we return.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Our investigative reporters at the Epoch Times have spent 18 months uncovering the biggest political scandal in modern history. We connected the dots around Spygate, the actions by Obama-era officials against Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Join me on Declassified as we bring you up-to-date developments on this unfolding scandal.
The death toll in Baghdad is still rising amid anti-government corruption protests. Meanwhile, a funeral procession was held today for those protesters.
According to the United Nations Human Rights Office, preliminary figures showed that at least 72 people have been killed in the latest round of protests over the weekend in the Shiite holy city of Karbala.
We call on the authorities to launch investigations into the use of force and these continued killings and injuries that are taking place, and to really knuckle down to meaningful dialogue to try and reduce the tension and bring some satisfaction to the situation.
Reports that have come to light indicate that masked Iraqi security forces have killed at least 14 people overnight after opening fire on protesters. Kerbal's police chief denied the claim in a statement. He also called footage of the incident fabricated, despite it going viral on social media.
So I think it's very much incumbent on the authorities to ensure, at least as much as they can, their own security forces act with due restraint.
Protesters who lost their lives were buried in Najaf on Tuesday during a mass funeral. The unrest, which began on October 1st, has been spurred on by a desire to end what Iraqis are calling deep-seated corruption in Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi's government. The total death toll is now at least 250 people.
China's foreign ministry said today there is nothing unusual about Chinese companies experiencing issues when investing abroad. This after a Chinese firm tried to lease an entire island in the Solomons for 75 years.
The Solomon Islands government said last week the lease was unlawful and should be terminated. The lease was for the entire island of Tulagi. It was signed by one of the Solomon Central Province and Chinese state-owned SAM Enterprise Group. Details of the long-term lease were made public shortly after the Pacific nation switched diplomatic ties from Taiwan to Beijing in September. The shift was strongly criticized by the United States. The agreement with China, SAM, included developing an oil refinery on the island, but the U.S. and Australia are concerned at its potential for dual use as a Chinese military base. U.S. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper issued in a statement applauding the move. He said many nations in the Pacific have discovered far too late that Chinese use of economic and military levers to expand their influence often is detrimental to them and their people. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang said the government is encouraging the Chinese company to talk to the Solomons government to resolve the issue.
Up next, a 6.6 magnitude earthquake rocked the southern Philippines today. It triggered landslides, toppled power lines, and shook buildings. Officials expect the death toll to rise. More after the break.
The lasting beauty of traditional oil painting. Realistic style, brilliant, moving, expressive. 2019 NTD Television International Competition for Figure Painting in Oil, guided by truthfulness, kindness, and beauty. We invite you to join us on our journey back to traditional art. Gold Prize Award of $10,000. For more detail, please visit oilpainting.ntdtv.com.
A 6.6 magnitude earthquake hit the southern Philippines this morning. The aftershocks continue as officials say the death toll has risen to 7.
The quake struck at 9:04 a.m. local time. It tore cracks in buildings in the island of Mindanao and showered debris on a 66-year-old man and a 15-year-old student, killing them. In many parts of the island, the strong quake toppled power lines and triggered landslides. Authorities said the death toll could rise further because many of the injured were not immediately brought to hospitals. The quake, whose magnitude was initially put at 6.7 by the European Mediterranean and Seismological Center, was the second powerful quake to strike Mindanao in 2 weeks.
South Korea conducted an anti-terror drill today, simulating a gas and terror attacks at a subway station in Seoul. This is part of the annual security drill. About 470 people from the Seoul Metro, police, military, fire department, local government, and citizens participated.
There are many kinds of dangers, such as terror attacks or fires worldwide. The Republic of Korea is no exception. The Guro District Office continuously conducts security drills to minimize terror attacks, fires, and human casualties.
During a drill, a train is filled with smoke and dozens of residents are trying to escape. Police officers take hold of the mock terrorist and military officers search for and confiscate any explosives. According to the Ministry of the Interior and Safety, the nationwide security drill started on Monday and will be held until Friday. Up next, a former Marine climbed the world's 14 highest mountains and smashed the previous world record. He manages to reduce the record time from almost 8 years to just over 6 months. More on his experience after the break.
Our investigative reporters at the Epoch Times have spent 18 months uncovering the biggest political scandal in modern history. We connected the dots around Spygate, the actions by Obama-era officials against Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Join me on Declassified as we bring you up-to-date developments on this unfolding scandal.
A Nepalese mountain climber smashed a world record when he climbed the 14 highest mountains in just over 6 months.
Nirmal Neems Perjal served in the elite Royal Marine Regiment of the British military. He broke the world record and beat the previous best of nearly 8 years. Perjal scaled the last of all 14 mountains today at 8:58 a.m. local time when he reached the peak of Shisha Pangma. He began his record attempt in Nepal on Annapurna Mountain, the 10th highest in the world, which he scaled on the 23rd of April this year. Previously, the world record for an individual climbing all 14 peaks was 7 years, 11 months, and 14 days, held by Jerzy Kukuczka in 1987, before it was beaten in 2013 by just 1 month and 8 days by South Korean Kim Chang-ho. Perjal joins a list of 40 climbers who have scaled the 14 highest peaks. Perjal had a rotating support team made up of exclusively Nepalese climbers.
The Hollywood premiere for the latest Terminator film was canceled due to wildfires impacting Los Angeles. The red carpet event for Terminator Dark Fate was set for Monday evening, but Paramount Pictures sent out a public email to media mid-Monday morning announcing the cancellation of the premiere. The company added that the food intended for the after-party will be donated to the American Red Cross to serve those affected by the fires. Actor Arnold Schwarzenegger was among the stars scheduled to attend the premiere, but even before the cancellation was announced, he posted on Twitter saying his family had safely evacuated at 3:30 in the morning. More than a dozen wildfires are currently ablaze across California, with the so-called Getty Fire breaking out early Monday morning in Los Angeles. According to fire officials, at least 8 homes have been destroyed and 6 damaged by the Getty Fire. Terminator Dark Fate is set to open on November 1st. Thanks for tuning in. Join us again tonight. I'm Tiffany Meyer.